Leonardo DiCaprio is not simply a famous person in Hollywood. He stands for something bigger: celebrity, stress, and the hidden cost of living under continual scrutiny. People still remember him as Jack Dawson from Titanic, standing at the edge of the ship with his arms wide open in one of the most famous scenes in movie history. But the man who made that moment happen has been carrying something much more complicated than admiration for years. Being famous didn't help him. It made everything bigger. For more than 30 years, he has lived at the crossroads of being famous and being watched too closely. Every choice, every step, and every quiet were looked at. And now that he's in his 50s, that life feels heavier than ever. The passage of time is different. The light doesn't go out, but it gets harder to ignore the weight of it. He was born on November 11, 1974, in Los Angeles, and his life didn't start out stable. Ermeline Inden Birkin, his mother, felt him kick for the first time while standing in front of a painting by Leonardo da Vinci. This was a peaceful, almost symbolic beginning related to art before he was even born. But that moment of poetry didn't shape his early life. His parents broke up before he turned one. George DiCaprio, his father, took a different path, but he was still there. Leonardo didn't have just one house, he moved between two, which were near together but emotionally separate. He was loved as a child. But he learned early on what it was like to live in two worlds. He was always with his mother in one home, going through the faded streets of Los Feliz. In the other, he was surrounded by creativity, comic books, ideas, and his father's imagination. That difference made something grow inside him. Being aware. Being sensitive. A peaceful awareness of how swiftly things can change. The neighborhood itself wasn't easy. It wasn't the fancy Los Angeles that people think of. It was hard, unpredictable, and occasionally dangerous. Sirens at night and tension on the streets became normal for him. He learned to pay attention to everything even as a child. School didn't help much. He felt like he was suffocating as he sat in class, that he wasn't really there. He later said that it was hard for him, both academically and emotionally. There was always a feeling that he didn't really belong anywhere. He kept that feeling. He was already very emotionally aware by the time he was 10. He could tell when anything was wrong in a room before anyone said anything. He could tell when something was going to go awry. That level of awareness is useful for staying alive, but it also leaves a mark. Still, something stronger was growing along with that pain. Go. His mother never ceased trying to make his future better. She drove him across the city to auditions, waited with him, and encouraged him, even when things didn't seem definite. That type of determination changed him in ways that success never could. His father gave him something else: creativity, the freedom to think for himself, and the idea that life could be broader than the world he grew up in. Leonardo learned how to be strong and creative from them. But the path to become an actor wasn't easy. Early and frequently, people said no. People thought he had too much energy when he was a kid. Not quiet. Not the same. People even turned him down for early chances since he didn't suit what they were looking for. That stuck with him. He went to a lot of auditions as a teenager and heard no more times than he could count. He was even told at one time to change his name to something more acceptable. He said no. That choice was important. He picked identity over ease, even when it made things harder. Modest chances began to show up over time: commercials, modest TV jobs, anything that kept him in the business. It wasn't pretty. Long hours, poor income, and continual stress. But he kept on. Because they could never stop. He got his first movie job in Critters 3, which wasn't a big deal but did provide him something important: experience. Then everything changed. He was in This Boy's Life with Robert De Niro in 1993. That part needed something more authentic and deeper. It made him stronger. That year, What's Eating Gilbert Grape revolutionized everything. He was only 19 years old when he gave a performance so compelling that it got him his first Academy Award nomination. People didn't simply see acting, they saw realness. The world finally took him seriously. But in 1997, stardom really hit hard. Titanic didn't just go well, it blew apart. The movie became a worldwide hit, and Leonardo's visage became one of the most famous in the world overnight. It was too much. He went from being an actor to being an obsession. People followed him everywhere. There was no more privacy. Every move made the news. And with that, a new fight began. People didn't just love him, they made him who he was. He couldn't get away from the sight of Jack Dawson. And even if millions of people liked that picture, he knew it was dangerous to continue in it. So he made a decision. He stood back instead of going after simple jobs. He left the spotlight at the height of his career, not to avoid success, but to protect his future as an actor. It was different when he came back in 2002. He worked with Martin Scorsese, which changed the course of his career. In movies like Gangs of New York, The Aviator, and The Departed, he displayed a very different side of himself, darker, more complicated, and more real. He wasn't trying to get people to like him anymore. He wanted people to respect him. His roles got deeper and more dramatic throughout the years. He had a lot of emotional weight in Inception. He stepped into something cruel in Django Unchained. He didn't hold back when he talked about excess and anarchy in The Wolf of Wall Street. But one thing stayed with him the whole time: the Academy Awards. He was nominated every year, but he never won. It became into a story that everyone knew. A pressure that built up over time. Finally, in 2016, it occurred. He earned the Academy Award for Best Actor for The Revenant after years of hard work and patience. It wasn't just a win. It was time to let go. But even after that, things didn't really get any easier. Success doesn't make fame go away. It alters form. He kept working, making movies, and growing his career through his company, Appian Way Productions. He stayed picky and took on roles that pushed him instead of doing the same thing over and over again. He also made a life for himself that let him go when he needed to. His residences, which were in places like Beverly Hills, Malibu, and beyond, were more than just fancy. They were there to keep you safe. Places where he could be without being seen. Blackador Cay, his own island in Belize, became more than just an investment. It showed that he cares about protecting the environment and making things last, something he has been doing for years. He made another persona than acting. Supporter. He has used his foundation to help protect the environment, animals, and attempts to defend the world as a whole. It wasn't just about how he looked, it became part of who he was. But even with all that, there are still areas of his life that aren't settled. Connections. He has been linked to a number of famous people over the years. Some partnerships lasted for years. Some others faded away peacefully. But there was still a pattern: connection, then distancing. No big ends. There was only quiet. And maybe that's what makes it harder. In a world full with noise, stillness can seem louder than anything else. Even with all the praise, success, and attention, one thing has always been out my grasp: lastingness. He has never been married. And even while he has loved, it hasn't always endured in a way that makes things last. That doesn't mean he stayed away from it. It indicates it never stayed. And for someone who is always in the public glare, constructing something private is one of the hardest things to achieve. He keeps going, though. Leonardo DiCaprio lives differently now that he's in his 50s. More in control. More picky. Less motivated by fame and more by significance. He hasn't beaten fame. He has learned to deal with it. And maybe that's the real tale. Not the rising. Not the prizes. Not even the past. But being able to live in a world where everyone is always watching and still hold on to something real. It doesn't matter how bright someone is in the end. It's how much of themselves they can keep.